Okay, now that you've fired up your game, what we want to do is change a few of the settings in menu, once again, just to improve the overall performance, because if you just leave it as is, you're probably going to get pretty crappy performance. So what you want to do is go to Configure, and go into Video. In here, make sure your rendering resolution is at 100%. It'll make things clearer. This, you don't want to touch the overall quality because we're going to be customizing this. We don't want to set it very low, at high, or medium, or anything. Make sure VSync is disabled. It's a big FPS killer. User interface, just make sure this is set to your native resolution. Size, this doesn't matter. Textures, if you have a decent graphics card from the last like 10 years, you should be fine putting your texture detail on high or very high, same with filtering. Make sure your video memory is set on auto. And then in quality, objects, this is actually tied to that setting in the files that we were editing called scene complexity. So if you find a scene complexity that works for you well, then you're not going to want to touch these. This, when you put it at very low, puts it at 250,000, low is I believe 300, normal is 500, high is 750,000, and then very high is 1,000,000. So you can customize that. It kind of jumps every 250,000. So what you may want to do is go in and customize that yourself, and if you do that, just don't touch this, otherwise it'll change it. Terrain, set that to very low. Clouds, disable them or set to very low or medium, I'd say. They can affect your FPS quite a bit. If you don't have a very good processor, I'd leave that disabled. When in doubt, just leave things disabled, see how it runs, and then slowly turn things back on and see what the game does. Shadows, I'd put disabled, or this really kind of depends. Some people say this doesn't affect their FPS. I find it affects mine, especially when I go to certain areas where there's buildings and apartment buildings. I get crazy low FPS because every single shadow is rendering at once, and it just is a horrible day. So I just kind of leave it disabled, or sometimes I'll put it on very low. In rendering, basically just turn all this off. This is going to give you a huge boost in FPS and make your experience much better. What you can do is put your edge smoothing to low rather than disabled. This will actually, I'm not sure if you can see this in the video, but when you turn it on, it sharpens it just a little bit, which can really help for picking players out from a distance. So I would recommend, if you can, keep this on, at least on very low, or on low. And if you can't, by all means disable it, but if at all possible, leave that on. Same with HDR quality, you can only put it on very low. Ambient occlusion disable, post-process disable, bloom, rotation, blur, turn those all the way down. Close out. You should be good to go then. So, now that everything has been finally set up, what you can do then is go to your character and customize a bit what you're going to look like when you spawn in. There's not too much you can customize. It's basically just male, female, and then different ethnicities and faces that you can choose. And there's actually a lot more than... They've actually added a couple since I've been through here. I've had this same person for a while now. But you can change your t-shirt, your pants, your shoes. I would recommend just picking something that's pretty camouflage. I found that beige and brown are kind of the best camouflage in DayZ, given the way everything looks. You'd think green would be, but most of the terrain is actually this brownish, orangish, yellowish, beige, tannish kind of color. So brown and beige seem to work better, but it's up to you. And then you just hit set default and then go back. Once you've done that, you want to go to change server. This will bring up all the servers currently available. What you can do is go to filter, and you can either search for hosts or search for servers by their names. You can also search based on ping, and if you've played PC, you know what ping is. You know you want a low ping. Whoa. So my dude's hand just kind of extended. Yeah. DayZ has a lot of bugs. So if you didn't know that, be prepared. This game is filled with, it's just a punishing game. It's filled with game-breaking bugs, little bugs. You will break your legs going downstairs, you will die for no apparent reason, but through all that, it's still one of the best games I think on the market. At least this style of gameplay. Some people don't prefer the standalone, but this type of survival simulator I think is one of the best types of games out there. So, once you've got your ping set, I'm just keeping it at 200, just because you wouldn't want to play on something above 100 if you can help it. Then you can start finding a server. Now, there are all these different options. The ones you want to be concerned with is first person, third person. So basically you want to look at mode, look at Hive, and then look at the time and the players. You're probably going to want to start with something in the daytime. It uses military time. So for instance, 21:23 is later in the day, 14:40 is about 2 in the afternoon. And then you want to look at it, whether it's public, private, and whether it's first or third person. The vast majority of servers are going to be first/third person, meaning you can do either. As you can see, these are all first and third persons. I would recommend, as you're starting, go for the first third person rather than jumping into a first person server. I would also recommend going public rather than private, because a private server, your character is tied to that server alone, whereas with public you can jump from server to server and your character will be able to switch between servers. So as you're starting out, I would recommend doing public. I'd also recommend playing on low populated servers just until you get your feet under you. If you go into a highly populated server, there's a good chance you're going to encounter other players, and although as a new player you may want to make friends and try to survive the zombie apocalypse together, most people are just going to shoot you in the face. So to avoid frustration, I would recommend going on a low populated server, but it's up to you. But for purposes of this series, I'm going to be doing what I did and what I think the majority of DayZ players do, which is starting on low populated servers, and then once they kind of get the hang of the game, you switch over and start playing on high populated servers. So we're just going to pick one kind of here at random and jump right in.